good morning to all of you, those of you who are offline, those of you who are online, and thank you so much for joining us. Welcome also to the very first event of Sai University's Center for Creative Writing and Translation, All the Words in the World, which is a poetry workshop facilitated by Fióna Bolger. This is designed to be the first of two workshops, so stay tuned. The second one will be held on the 23rd of November, and I will share details of that with you very soon. It feels really special to have Fióna with us. Some years ago, the two of us worked together on a collaborative experimental transcontinental poetry project, which resulted in a book titled All the Worlds Between, which Yoda brought out. And I've known Fióna from many other contexts as well. So she's one of the most generous mentors I know of, and I speak from experience. And I really was keen on having her do this first event for us. Fióna is an experienced facilitator, workshop facilitator, and a poet of repute. She has run workshops for Yoda Press in Delhi, for IIT Madras, at the Irish Writers Center and Mother Tongues Festival in Dublin. Her very first collection, A Compound of Words, was published by Yoda Press in 2019. Love in the Original Language, which is this book here, and I will leave a copy of this for the Sai University Library as well, came out recently from Southern Press, Ireland. Fióna's work has also appeared in various journals, online, offline, and so on. So she has a website, fionabolger.poetry.com. So please welcome Fióna, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Srinatha. And in a way, as that poem, I'll stop sharing for a second. In a way, as that poem suggests, I live between Ireland and India, and India is very close to my heart. So it's been wonderful. This whole Zoom thing gave me the opportunity to actually exist somewhat in two places at the same time. And Srilatha has really facilitated that by allowing me to be with you all today. And it's an absolute joy. I think it's so much. It's so when you see the work I'll be talking about, you can see that India is very, very, very close to my heart, and I'm very much there with you in person and here at the same time in Ireland. So it's a cold, wet morning in Dublin. So I hope you're having some sunshine and it's not too hot there in Chennai. So we'll kick off with, well, the first thing is, at any point, if anybody wants to say anything, you can either raise your hand by going to the reactions at the bottom. And I think, oh no, there's actually is there a raise your hand? I think no, I think you have to go to reactions and, oh, it recognizes hand gestures. Okay, that's very complicated. No, you can raise your hand like this. I can see you if you have your camera switched on. If not, you can either put a message in the chat, or you can just let me know by maybe unmuting yourself and shouting out. I'm very happy to take questions, and I love to hear your opinions. So this is a real joining together. I think Anuj has found the raise your hand. Anuj, did you want to say something, or you're just trying out the raise your hand?
I want to say something.
Yes, please do, Anuj. Yes.
First of all, a very good morning to each one of you who are here. So first of all, I would love to extend my heartiest gratitude to Professor Srilatha and Bharat for putting this meetup, and with well-known poet like Professor Fióna. So, like, I have been participating in all the international competitions which ask us to express ourselves in form of poetry. But like, I tried my best, but each time I ended up with winning and participant certificate note. Like, I couldn't qualify all this. So the reason behind joining this session is to learn how to grow my mind to think differently, so that I can present myself what I want to be. And I read the poem, so it's like it's something like you are trying to express a vast thing in small words. That's what I want to learn. So thank you very much once again, professors.
Thanks, Anuj. I'm just Fióna. I'm no professor. I'm no doctor even. So I'm afraid I'm just me. But yeah, fabulous. Competitions are just, you never know. So I think when we write, we try to express something of ourselves. We tell something of our truth. and who it lands with. And I think the poem is a little bit about that. Who it lands with, we can never expect. And sometimes something that you say, something that you write lands with somebody, but that might not be the person making the decision about the competition. So just to remember that, you know, you get a lot of rejections, and sometimes it takes a while to find the audience that you need. And also we keep working, we keep working on our craft, we keep reading other people. And today is about coming at it from a new angle. And I suppose I preach the philosophy of plurilingualism. And where did I learn that? I learned it in India, because as I always tell people outside India, you know, you can't even tell a joke in India without breaking into at least 3 different languages. You know that joke, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, American born, confused Desi, emigrated from Gujarat. Now, how do you begin to explain that to somebody who doesn't know the South Asian context, who doesn't understand the word Desi, and so on and so forth? So I think, and as you can see from this poem, I'm playing between languages. So I'll just very quickly give the poem a read. And the wonderful thing is, I normally, when I read this poem, when I share my work, I have to explain everything to everybody. But the only word here that you may not know is Lancaster. And that's a word from an Amitav Ghosh novel. And he talks about it as the person who connects the different languages. And we're going to be looking at that in detail in a few minutes. So this is a Lancaster plays with quantum reality. We are doing lob pigeon, lobbing our words back and forth. You ishq mine and I pyar yours. Back and forth we lob these loves. Each time they fly back and forth, they exist in me and you. I cannot hold all the words in my head, or even all of one word. Right now, a little piece of this exists inside your head. And just to remember then that when a word comes to you, you know, this is playing with all the words in India. If you want to talk about love, you can talk about ishq, you can talk about pyar, and then there's that lovely word lob pigeon, which is love business. So coming from kind of from pidgin English. So that idea that we can use all the words that we have, and also that what's in our heads, it lands sometimes, as I said to Anuj, with another person, and it exists inside them also. But in a way, as a poet, you only do half the work in making the poem. It's the reader or the listener who does the other half of the work. So just to straighten it out, any word in any language is cool here. So we're gonna as we go through the workshops, I'd like you all to remember that, and to feel free. Whatever languages you have in your head, I'm probably sitting in a room with people who have, you know, we probably have about 10 languages here between all of us. And I love that. My apologies, I'm going to be reading a little bit in Hindi and a little bit in Tamil, and my Hindi and my Tamil are my own. They're not great. So in case I butcher the words, apologies way in advance. So by the end of this workshop, my promises to you, you'll have read a variety of plurilingual texts. So plurilingual, all the languages. So it'll be predominantly in English, but there will be words coming in from other languages. Hopefully you'll have found new ways to generate initial drafts. So to make the first draft, so we won't have any finished poems that you'll be sending off, but you hopefully will have new ideas, and hopefully you'll have started a few pieces, and then have the beginnings of some new work. And just note in advance, you don't need to make notes. I'm going to be sending on the slides as a PDF to Srilata, and Srilata will then share them with all of you. So there's no need to panic about, oh my God, I missed that moment. No, you didn't. It's okay. It's coming to you. So the first poem here is by a woman called Jo Shapcott. And I'm going to use this poem, and then I'm going to look at 2 more, and then we're going to do a little exercise. So this poem is called Quark. Again, it has that that meaning from quantum physics, but also in Germany, quark is a little bit like pyre or dahi or yogurt. So it's kind of got that. It's got a few different meanings. So transcendental, said the technician, to stumble on a quark that talks back. I will become a mystagogue, initiate punters into the wonder of it for cash. Bollocks, said the quark from its aluminium nacelle. I don't need no dodgy crypto humans strategizing my future. Gonna downsize under the cocoa plum or champak. Drink blue marimbas into the sunset and play with speaking quark-like while I beflower the passing gravitons. So any responses or reactions when you hear that poem? Anything you notice about it? Anything that surprises you or interests you? Yes, Anuj.
Sometimes, like in each poem, I am observing like the usage of word Hindi word. Like in the last poem as well, I observed like there was ishq and pyar which were used, and in this word poem also the job sponge squawk. It's a Hindi word called champak. It's a Hindi word. So like it is something which is fascinating me. Like there's like combination of language in one poem. It's like it's for the first time for me. Like I am observing, like I am seeing and reading a poem which is combination of 2 to 3 languages. So it's like really fascinating for me.
Fabulous. Yeah. I think I know champak, and then in I think in Tamil it's well, I know in Canada it's sampige, so I don't know what it is in Tamil actually, I have to say, but it's that beautiful tree with the lovely orange flower, as I'm sure you all know. Yeah, so I think that's a word that's been stolen into English, and that's the thing about English. I mean, not only did they colonize the world, but they went around kind of stealing all these words. But the wonderful thing is that when we get to speak English, when we get to use English, we get to kind of bring in words, and in a way there's nothing to stop us. It's a very open language to bringing in new words. And I think every time we have a new word in a poem, in a way, as you said, Anuj, doesn't it feel good when you see a word that you know from another, and you know that word and somebody else doesn't, so somebody else is learning that word, and there's a wonderful sense of openness. Yeah. If any of you didn't understand the poem completely, fabulous. I'm with you on that. It's playing with words, it's playing with language, and it has a meaning beyond meaning. There's it's kind of a fun piece. We'll look at the next one, which is one of my own, and this poem was written initially in a workshop with that poet Joe Shapcott, whose work I would recommend you check out. A wonderful mentor, wonderful poet, and so I wrote this as a result of an exercise that I'm going to do with you. So this is also the name of my first collection, and it's also the first poem in my first collection. So it's called A Compound of Words. The words, you'll know a lot of the words in here. The words you won't know will be "What you looking at," which is a phrase people say in Dublin, and it means, what are you looking at? What you looking at? And it's kind of aggressive. If somebody comes up to you on the street, it's a bit like, they're throwing shapes and going, "Hey, what you looking at?" And you kind of go, "Nothing," and you run. So it's a bit like Adipavanga ni. So there's a few different words in there that you might enjoy. So try to atomize. What you looking at? Imagine a letter, a string supplying a side way to transubstantiation, avoiding the black hole of a lemon market, the consonants shifting, the click of the Q, Celtic fossils, trickle down through the generations. Do you know, it's all Maya, and we, Salah, must do penance. Ari Povanga ni, as you cruise for a bruise. Crushed together, we make juice. So any comments? Anything you notice about that poem? If you don't feel like speaking out in public, you can always pop it in the chat as well, and I'll read it out, or Srilata will read it out.
Can I say something?
Yes, Saraswati?
Saraswati.
Yes, please.
So I don't know what makes this poetry. What are the characteristics of the words in conjunction? Which are that makes it poetry? So there's one of the things I want to learn from this workshop is that what is it that makes something poetry and not simply text of combination of words?
That's a really interesting question, and I suppose we could have an entire workshop on the subject of what is poetry. For me, I would say that a poem is language that we've really focused on, language we've really looked at. And in some ways, you know, there's that kind of cliche of a shopping list could be poetry. If I write it out and I say, this is a poem, and I suppose it's what we bring to it and the focus that we put on it. And the way in which we approach it. So it's a little bit like modern art. You know, I could take, you know, a handkerchief and hang it in a gallery. And if I frame it in a certain way, I can say this is art. So it's a very interesting question. And I think we could spend a long time on it. For me, the short answer is, sorry, I'm just noticing there's a message in there as well. I'm going to just get to that in a second. So yeah, so for me, it would be the way in which we as readers approach it makes it poetry. And maybe it's the idea that we are really focusing and taking every single word. We're taking language very seriously. So for me, that's what poetry is. It's somebody who's taking the language very serious, focusing on the words rather than taking it seriously, because I know there's kind of a fun element to this poem. At the same time, I think there's an element of seriousness in the poem as well, that in Ireland, the Q Celtic fossils, all the different generations, all the different languages that we've had in this country, and now we have new languages coming in, we have new ideas, and all of us, when we get together, crush together, we make juice. So we make something beautiful when we mix all of those languages in our mouths and we chomp them up. Yeah, so thank you for that really, really interesting, thought-provoking question. Somebody has popped in the chat. Here is also the word Maya, exactly the word Maya, and the idea that it is all illusion. Language itself is just something that we as human beings have agreed on, and we've agreed to share the meanings. I see Chitra has a question. Chitra, would you like to say something?
I wonder if context or knowing the context is important. I do draw, sort of my own understandings because I don't know half the context. And that's valuable for me, but I think to get all of it, to get the focus or the seriousness that you speak of, knowing context is also important. For instance, Celtic fossils, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. I suppose if I can just ask you, Chitra, what do you get from it then without me? And then I'll tell you what Celtic fossils are, and I can kind of go into it a bit more. But I'm really curious to know what it is you get from it as initially.
I do. The only thing I think I get from it immediately is that there is change, and that there are combinations, and there is an amalgamation, but or compound, but nothing. I mean, not more.
Yeah, and that's precisely it. Yeah. Yeah, and I suppose what the other thing that I'm kind of looking at as well is the aggression that we have in language. You know, what you're looking at Adivangani, all that Salah, all this kind of the way in which we use language almost as a weapon against each other as well. And then that idea. So in Ireland, we speak the Celtic language. Irish is a Celtic language. Very few people speak it anymore, but it was there, and I suppose I have a bit of it. And there are two different types of Celtic language. There's the P Celtic languages and the Q Celtic languages, and Irish is a Q Celtic language. So it's kind of like there's a cut. So we say words with a cut, like cahar and cian, whereas if you were to look at Welsh, it would be padar and pen. Pen is head, and in Irish it's cian as head. So the P and the C kind of interchange. It's a little bit like between Telugu and Tamil, you have ra and va, and then you have, so you have this kind of switching between consonants, between languages. So that's kind of what the Celtic fossils are, that we have these words still in our words every day. So the fossils are still there in our thinking and in our language. I hope that helps a little. I'm going to move on to somebody you all know very well, I'm sure, Amitav Ghosh. And this is where I stole the word Lancaster from. And just to make it very clear, every word that you will ever use is probably, unless you've made it up yourself and explained it to people, it's probably a word somebody else has used. So, you know, as writers, we only have words that we get from other people. So we're always stealing and borrowing. So I stole Lancaster, and I do have in the notes at the back of my book that I got Lancaster from Amitav Ghosh. So we're going to have a quick look here. We're not going to read the whole thing. We're just going to come down to this little bit here. And what of the Chinese language, the general asked, living in that country? Have the two of you made any attempt to familiarize yourselves with that tongue? They answered in one voice. No, they said, they spoke no Chinese, because the common language of trade in southern China was a kind of patois, or as some call it, pidgin, which meant merely business, and was thus well suited to describe a tongue which was used mainly to address matters of trade. Even though many Chinese spoke English with ease and fluency, they would not negotiate in it, believing that it put them at a disadvantage in relation to Europeans. In Pidgin, they reposed far greater trust, for the grammar was the same as that of Cantonese, while the words were mainly English, Portuguese, and Hindustani. And such being the case, everyone who spoke the jargon was at an equal disadvantage, which was considered a great benefit to all. It was, moreover, a simple tongue, not hard to master, and for those who did not know it, there existed a whole class of interpreters known as Lancasters, who could translate it from both English and Chinese. And I'd just love to hear what you think of that. Anything you notice about it? It's set in pre-Opium War kind of South Asia and East Asia. So that's in case anybody doesn't know the series, the Ibis trilogy. Yes, Sai.
Sorry, Bharat. I should have renamed myself.
You're not Sai. Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Sorry, since none of them are raising my hands, maybe I'll try. For me, I think specifically the word Lancaster is in some sense a replacement for translator, which signifies meaning being translated to something, transfigured or transmuted into something else. But Lancaster, I guess, in some sense stresses the relationship between two languages. And maybe it's also a very powerful idea, I suppose. Yeah, that's all I wanted to share.
Yeah, exactly. I love that you picked up on that. And that's why I would like to think, in a way, I think poets, especially plurilingual poets, can be Lancasters, because can you imagine when I bring that other poem with Ishq and Pyar and Lob Pidgin into an Irish audience where people don't know Hindi, don't know Tamil, don't know Urdu, and you bring this poem in and you say, now I'm explaining, and then suddenly anybody who does know Hindi in the room, and there's lots of people around the world who speak Hindi and Urdu, suddenly that person is linked in. Suddenly the people in the room are linking with another culture and another way of thinking. And suddenly they're like, oh, because in English, we only really have the word love, and then everything else. It's such we really lack words for love in English. And so it's really interesting, to link that. And so I see my role sometimes as a poet, as a Lancaster, connecting people. And I think all of you, with all of your languages in your heads, also have that potential to be Lancasters. So thank you so much for pointing that out. Yeah. So any other comments on that poem? Anybody want to throw an idea in? Yes, I see Saraswati, and maybe we'll go with Saraswati first and then Chitra.
I'm wondering, I have some difficulty with poetry, mainly because I don't know what the writer wanted to convey and what the reader gets conveyed to him or her. And so there seems to be always a gap, and the amount of information you gather from a poem, or the amount of what's the word for it? Amount of joy you get from reading a piece of poetry. Depends on where you're coming from, where you've been, where you're going, and so it's very confusing to me to say that I love this poetry or I didn't love this poetry because of whatever reason, and it could be because of my limitations, or it could be because of the limitations of the poetry or the poet. So does it matter what it is? Should I understand a piece of poetry all the time? Or as these are things which come to, so more often than not, when I see some set of words juxtaposed together, I leave it and go on to the text part of something, because that's something I can understand better. So I take a shortcut, in other words, leaving alone things which are not in my domain, in my comfort level. And so I miss something in the person, but that's the way it is.
That's really interesting, because sometimes I think there's a communication beyond the logico-mathematical, beyond the kind of rational. And I think if I can tell you exactly what a poem means, then there will be no point in writing the poem. And in many ways, I think a poem is almost like a happening, an experience, than something that I can tell you, this is what the poem means. So it's less of a mathematical equation or less of a statement of fact and more of a little thought experience. So the fact that something comes to you from a poem, or it gives you a certain feeling, that in itself, I would think is kind of like the poem is happening. A little bit of the poem is existing inside you. Maybe not all of what existed in the poet, and maybe something different to what existed in the poet. There's a wonderful poet, Adrienne Rich, and she always says, I used to sit down, with an idea in my head, and I would write it down as a poem. And then she said, and then I realized that actually it's not about writing something down as it is in my head. It's more about taking a thing that I'm really interested in and writing a poem where something happens as I write the poem. So as you're writing, you have a realization. You have an experience. When I began to write Compound of Words, I had no idea it was going to end with crushed together we make juice. And in fact, it took a few days to find the ending. And then I found the ending and I said, yes, this is my point. This is what this is about. This is about all of us with all of our tongues coming together and making juice, making something good with everything together, crushed together. So it's almost like in a poem, as you're writing it, something must happen to you so that when the reader reads it, something will happen inside them. It may not be the same thing almost, but I think that's kind of, does that make any sense to you? Does that help?
Yeah. Can I extend that further? So I suppose that the reader is able to appreciate or understand what I've written. Does it make it bad poetry?
Not at all.
Another way of saying that is that if somebody understands you better than somebody else, is there a relative ranking of the two people in terms of the sophistication of reading or writing poetry? So these are questions which I don't have answers for. But
interesting questions, but I would be very reluctant to class anything as good or bad poetry, because I think for some people this particular piece may make something wonderful happen inside them, make them angry, make them sad, bring out emotion in them. And if that works between that poet and that person, then that poem is a functioning poem. So who am I to say this is a good or a bad poem? So I would be very reluctant to judge. In certain places, certain poems work better. Between certain people, certain poems work better. But I would always say there's no such thing as a good or a bad poem. Thank you so much. Chitra, you also had your hand raised.
I think I'll hold back because I think the initial point that Professor Krithivasan made about it being different stories for different people and different contexts was what I wanted to just talk about.
Oh, okay. Fabulous. Yeah, no, and keep your questions coming. I love to think about these things. There's also a message in the chat. Somebody has put in, basically, I think it means you do not need a specific language if you convey what you want to each other. For example, my mother talking to a person who is Bengali and my mother does not know Bengali, they still manage to interpret each other. And this comes to another thing, the sound of the words. So even if people don't understand the word ishq or pyar, they have that sound. And so the music of the poetry, even if you don't understand the meaning of it, I have very bad Hindi, but one of my favorite things to listen to is Hindi poetry, because the rhythms and the sounds. So even if you don't understand the language completely, I think you can get so much from it as well. And again, that's not to say that it should sound good, but the meaning doesn't matter. All of these different levels, I think, function in poetry. Yeah. So we'll just head on to there's one more. I'm just going to bring up that poem. We've one more person. Sorry, I can't switch on my video. That's okay. I love the line about equal disadvantage and benefit used in the same line in which they are opposites. Yes, yes. We didn't actually talk too much about this, but absolutely. Thank you so much, Ganesh Raj, for that comment. Yeah, that idea that everybody's at a disadvantage, that nobody has the power. And that's the other thing about language. Language is used as a form of power. So if I speak fluently or I speak in a certain way, then I have power over someone else. If I find myself in a language, recently I found myself somewhere and I said something in Hindi, and what I said was completely not what I meant. And everybody had a great laugh and I felt very uncomfortable. And then afterwards I was thinking, I thought, how many times does it happen that somebody is in an English-speaking environment in Ireland, and because of their accent or because of the way in which they phrase something, other people feel, oh, well, I know better than that person. And how often do we use language as a power play? Even, you all know about language riots in India, and this language trying to dominate over that language, and this person, and all the different registers also, even within one language. So it's language and power, and how do we create spaces where it's flatter? And in a way, by bringing different languages into English, by creating spaces where somebody maybe who is a native English speaker in Ireland or in the UK doesn't understand certain words, maybe that it opens things up and it complicates things and changes power relations. So it's also a way of sticking your tongue out, literally and figuratively. So this is by an Iranian American poet, and it's just one more poem that I thought to bring along because I think it does something between languages again. I know there aren't many other languages in here, but I think he plays between things. So he is very open about being a recovered alcoholic. And so this collection that he's written, Calling a Wolf, focuses very much on that. So that's a little bit of background that will help, but that's even in the title. So Kaveh Akbar's poem, Portrait of the Alcoholic Floating in Space with Severed Umbilicus. In Fort Wayne, I drank the seniors. Old Milwaukee, Old Crow. In Indianapolis, I stopped. Now I regret every drink I never took. All around, coffee grounds and eggshells, this sweating, a mouthful of lime. As a boy, I stole a mint green bra from a laundromat. I took it home to try on while my parents slept, filled its cups with the smallest turnips in our pantry. The underwire grew into me like a strangler fig. My blood roiled then as now. Back on earth, frog spit is dripping down wild aloe spikes. Salmon are bullying their way upstream. There is a pond I leapt into once with a lonely blonde boy. When we scampered out, one of us was in love. I could not be held responsible for desire. He could not be held at all. I wonder where he is now. If he looked up, he might see me, a sparkling. I always hoped that when I died, I would know why. My brother will be so sad. He will tell his daughter I was better than I was. He will leave out my cruel drunk nights, the wet mattresses, my driving alone into cornfields, unsure whether I'd drive out. I wish he were here now. He could be here. This cave is big enough for everyone. Look at all the diamonds. So even if you don't want to turn on your camera, and even if you don't want to speak, you could even pop a line that you like from it into the chat, or pop a line you don't like and just say hate. You can put the line in, because I know there's lots of you there that we haven't heard from. So if there's anybody there, and those people, anybody who wants to comment, it'd be lovely to hear what interests you or what you notice about this poem.
I really love the title, Fiona.
Yes.
It goes a long way. It's a mile long and
Yeah.
does quite a bit of work, I think.
Yeah, he's actually, the other poem I'm going to bring along from him, which we're going to be looking at in the next section, is also to do with the sky. And I think he spends a lot of time looking up at the sky. So I see Maya has her hand up, and I am just going to read here. Somebody has says, okay, so what does he mean when he says, now I regret every drink I never took? That is a really good question. And my answer to you would be, what do you think he means? I mean, it's such a great line, the way he, we expect him to say, I regret every drink I took, because that's what you should. Obviously, you should say that. And he says, I regret every drink I never took. What? So he's really, I think it comes across this very ambivalent attitude to his love of alcohol, or his addiction to alcohol. And it's very clever. And it's kind of sad. And yeah, so what does he mean by it? I don't know, but I get a feeling of ambivalence, because in one way, there's a lot of self-hatred at the end. And he talks about cruel drunk nights and wet mattresses. That's not glamorous. But at the same time, why is he saying he regrets every drink he never took? So there's this, I think there's a push, pull. Like, you can talk about cutting the umbilicus, but yet we will always be connected in some way, positive or negative, to the person who gave birth to us. So interesting. Thank you so much for highlighting that. And somebody else has said, the line speaks volumes. I could not be held responsible for desire. He could not be held at all. Yes, so true about how events pan out in life. Yes, I love, it's such a clever line, isn't it? And it's so unexpected. And that's what we call like a turn. So you're writing something as a writer, and suddenly you look at it and you go, oh, I could twist this. And he just seems to do that so cleverly and so smoothly. It's almost, for me, it's an absolute pleasure, and a kind of a crafting pleasure to see the skill with which he does it. But then the emotional honesty of that, I could not be held responsible for desire. Who can be? But he could not be held at all. So we know this slippery boy has disappeared. Maya, would you like to tell us what you wanted to say? We'd love to hear from you.
Hi, Fiona. Sorry, I'm not turning my camera on. My connection is rather unstable. I'm logging
No problem.
Yeah, I think in this poem, I'm not sure I quite, it's got mixed reactions. I don't know if I quite like the fact that he is so alcoholic, and he seems to be, as you said, very ambivalent about his position, etc. But one of the lines that I thought were great was what Ganesh Raj has already indicated. But the way he's put this, there's a pond I left into once with a lonely blonde boy. When we scampered out, one of us was in love. I think that to me is kind of poetry, the way the whole thing has been brought out. I don't know, for want of another word, that sounds really poetic in all this.
Yes. When we scampered out, one of us was in love. And of course, at that point, we're wondering which one of them is in love. And then we go on and we discover who is in love. And it's so, and the poet is really playing with us almost, feeding the information drip by drip. But at the same time, there's a huge emotional honesty to that, and a vulnerability. And I, sometimes we don't necessarily, as you said, you're ambivalent about whether or not you like his kind of romanticizing in some ways of the alcohol, and yeah, you don't have to like the poet, you don't even have to like what the poet says, but if it makes you feel something, I would say it's doing its trick. And one thing I'd love you all to notice is there is no punctuation in this poem, so just that he uses spacing as a form of punctuation, and how does that impact on our reading of it? And he plays with Maya says no punctuation as he is drunk. Well, he may have written it drunk, but I can tell you from looking at this poem, there's a huge amount of skill has gone into where he has put the spaces, and also his enjambment, which is where you let one line lead on to the next. So it's almost like you're walking along the road and then the road disappears. So here we have Old Milwaukee, Old Crow. So he pulls us into the next line. Now I regret. Who wants to stop reading when they read a line? Now I regret. What do you regret? So we're pulled onto the next line. Every drink I never took. And we go down. When we scampered out, one of us, what was in love. So he does this thing. He instead of having a line that has a chunk of meaning, he gives us half the meaning, and then it's like the ad break, and we're like, what? And we follow on to the next line. And then the enjambment, so this is the enjambment. And then these pauses, then we can have a breath. So where normally a more conventional poet might give us the line break here, where the enjambment, where the gaps are, he does it at the end of the line and pulls us on. And the gap here is where the line break would normally be. I could not be held responsible for what? For desire, So he's constantly feeding it out, just little by little. Here we have somebody else has popped in. I think this poem reflects the unexpected or unforeseen nature of human thoughts and desires. Thoughts pop up without warning, and somehow we make a connection through these thoughts. And I think that's very true. And we make connections which aren't necessarily logical, which aren't necessarily explicable in plain language. But poetry allows us to say, when I see this, it makes me think of this, and to follow that crazy line of thought. And now we're going to do a little bit of writing, and that's kind of what I'd like you to do. Follow those crazy thoughts, follow those desires, follow that madness. Think of yourself as in some sort of a drunken stupor. Just follow. And the last line, the line about his brother, shows he wants to be remembered as a nice person. Yeah, there's a lot of self-loathing in those lines. So that's really interesting. Thanks for highlighting that. Ganesh Raj has his hand raised.
Yeah.
Did you
hi. I just wanted a couple of clarifications. So could that line where he's talking about now I regret every drink I never took, could that be used in a way that he concentrated only on alcohol and probably not like on drink like coffee or something like that, or any non-alcoholic drink, and he's regretting that fact? Or is it a pure, in terms of interpreting it, a pure interpretation of alcoholic drink? And that was my first one. And sorry to interrupt you. And the second one I wanted to ask was I have some sort of a vague idea about this cave is big enough for everyone, but I was confused at look at all the diamonds. So how do you interpret that?
So first of all, Ganesh, I'm not the expert. Each one of you has a little bit of that poem inside you. So that's really interesting what you brought in about the drink. And for me, when I hear the word drink, I would only think of alcohol. But actually, that's a really, really interesting point that you're making. And maybe it's the drinks he didn't take, the coffee or the water or the non-alcoholic drinks that he's regretting. So that's a really interesting idea. I have no idea what was in the poet's mind, but that is a really interesting angle on it. And I need to go back and look at it again. So thank you for enriching my understanding of the poem through that. And then for me, the cave, I see it as, and I suppose it's because I've read the collection and because he spends a lot of time looking up at the sky. So for me, it's almost like Earth is a cave and those, the diamonds are the stars in the sky. That's what I see. but I think for each one of us, there's going to be something different when you read it. So you may get something else, but you know, the cave is big enough for everyone. I love the idea that all of us, you know, there's space for everyone here. I hope that helps. Thank you so much. So if I may ask you all, some people will want to write with pen and paper. Some people may want to write on their laptop. So whatever works for you, on your phone, on your laptop, on the wall, with lipstick, I don't mind. Somebody else may object. But yeah, so I'm going to give you a few little tasks to do. And if you don't mind rolling with it, if you have any questions, pop them out. But this is going to be kind of like a DIY of your own poem. So I'm going to give you a series of categories, and I'd like you just, when you see the category, for here it's medical, just to write the category's name and then write down 4 to 6 words that come into your head. No need to think too carefully about it. Whatever words come into your head when I say medical, and I'm going to do it too. So I'm just going to give you a minute. Don't think, just write. So you can either make a note on your computer or you can make a note on a piece of paper. Just 4 to 6 words. I would like you to look over your categories, and you can choose 5 categories or maybe just 4, but choose a few categories. And I'd like you to just start writing, trying to use those words. So it doesn't really matter that if you make sense or not, but just take the words and just start writing with them. So for instance, in my category of medical, the first word I have is cancer, then I have doctor, treatment, chemotherapy, and death. And then maybe in technological, I have monitor, Zoom, plug in online. So I'm going to try and write so I'll start off with the word cancer and see where that takes me. And then stop and throw in another word. Maybe I'll take the word monitor and throw that in and see where that takes me. So hop between your different categories. And when you get stuck for something to write, just throw in a word. The more random it seems to be from, you know, more random or distant category, the better it works. So just go with it, see where it takes you. You know, you just to think back over the poems you've looked at, they seem to be words from all different areas, all different categories, squished together. So that's what you're doing. You're just going to take the words and squish them together. And it doesn't have to make sense, or at least it won't make sense to you initially. Afterwards, you look back over it and you'll find where it takes you, and it'll be very interesting. It's a little bit like you know, sticking your hand in a drawer and pulling out. You've no idea what you're going to pull out. Well, if your drawers are chaotic like mine, maybe you're very organized. But yeah, so it's a bit like putting your hand into something and not quite knowing. It's a lucky dip. So no need to make sense. Have fun. And I'm going to change this to about 10 minutes so that we'll have time to do one more exercise. So no pressure at all. Just try to keep writing solidly for the 10 minutes. Okay. And if anybody has any questions, I'm here, and you can always ask me either in the chat, public chat, private chat, but I'm here. So you're not alone, and just to write for 10 minutes, and nobody's going to look over your shoulder and see what you've written. So don't be censoring yourself at all. Any questions? Yeah. Okay. Go you. Anuj, yeah.
Ma'am, are we supposed to put a particular, they gave us like few things like the category. There was medical, then slang, then we were having pants and trays. So like, are we supposed to choose any particular category, or are we supposed to choose a particular category and then merge it in one category to make one poem?
So what I'm suggesting is pick maybe 4 or 5 categories that you like particularly, maybe put circles around those categories and the words you've chosen in those categories, and try and put together a piece that has all of those words, or as many of those words as you can into one piece.
Can I not choose one particular category and try to merge all the words of different categories to make one poem?
Yeah, you can do that. The idea is that you don't use just one category, because generally when you write in English, we're kind of thinking of a particular kind of, so we might be thinking about medical treatment, cancer, chemotherapy. So we'll end up with a poem with all these words in it. And the idea is to take words that don't seem to fit together and to mush them together and see what happens. So it's kind of like, you don't normally put sugar with spice, but when you put sugar and chili together, the flavor is amazing, So that's what we're doing. It's kind of like a masala, it's kind of mushing everything together, frying them up, and then grinding them and seeing what kind of masala you can get. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah?
thank you.
Great. And no need to worry about making sense. Don't worry about the sense of it. You'll worry about that later. So I can see people are already popping their lines in the chat. So if you're feeling shy and you don't want to read it out, you can just pop it in the chat and then I'll read it out. Or if you don't want me to gobble up your words, you're very welcome to read it out. So, and we're not looking for we're not looking for perfection. We're just looking for fun. So it's always fun. I do this every so often, and it's just such a fun thing to do. And you discover things are on your mind that you didn't realize were on your mind. How was it for you people? Oh, I'm seeing here, guarantee, and just Marty. Oh my gosh, we have a Kannadigan here. Chitra, you must have Kannada.
I'm sorry, I wasn't able to send that correctly. I'll put it all together and then send it.
Don't worry, or you can read it out to us. And I love somebody else has put in, what up, human? I love that. Oh my gosh, guys, this is all wonderful. I'm seeing amazing bits and bobs. I'm going to be sharing this, I'm saving this chat. So I see there's one or two in there. The first person who got in there, would you like to read it out, Lakshmi? Or will I read it out? What's your decision?
Sure, you read it out, please.
Okay.
Because you do a better job than me.
Oh, no.
No, you have a way of reading things. That's why, which I like.
I'm happy to read, but always remember your words are probably best read out by you. Great. So we have, what a drama queen she was. She had fever and cough, could have taken Frozen and Tulsi tea, remained calm and do her knitting. I love that. Thank you so much. Thanks, Lakshmi. Yeah. So I see, okay, Chitra had one, and then Suhita has one, and I think Saraswati has one, and Anuj Kumar had his hand up. So let's go with Chitra. Do you want to give us your lines, Chitra?
Yes, guarantee, but adjust Madi, for sadness, for being out of control. Police will flood your home, as will the Silandi, Parkalam. Poochas and Pooch might be there with the Sampangi Huvu, might help with Adipuli.
I love it. I love it. How did you feel writing it? Did it surprise you what came out?
Yes, but there's a lot of personal in it. So I don't know if it'll make sense at all.
Yeah, well, I got the kind of the gist, like it felt, and I love the fact that you used so much, you had loads of Kannada and loads of Tamil in it as well. And most of it I could get. There were a couple of bits I didn't quite get, but I think it's well worth working with and playing with. And I have a theory, this is not very scientific, but the world is a globe. Okay. And as long as we stay on the surface, things are very different on one side of the globe and on the other side of the globe. So if I describe, my house, and I have a, wall-to-wall carpet and, all of that kind of thing, it looks very different. It sounds very different to how somebody's house would be in Chennai. But if I describe deep down what my life is, not the superficial bits, but the deep down bits. So if I go from the surface of the globe down into the molten center of the globe, that and what's going on in the deep down bit in Chennai or anywhere else in the world, there's a molten center which connects all of us. So when you say it's very personal, the deeper you go into the personal in some ways, the closer you get to that molten lava, which is all of us. It's humanity. That's not to take away the differentiation, the power differences, the inequalities. It's not to say, oh, but we're all the same. We are, but at the same time, I recognize the nuance and the complexity required. But just to say, don't be afraid of going deep, deep, deep into the molten lava of your truth, because sometimes that can be the truth other people need to hear as well. So thank you for that. And at the same time, you don't have to cut yourself open and put your lungs on the page, in your heart. At the same time, Emily Dickinson says, tell the truth, but tell it slant. So that lovely idea that, we can, and in a poem like this, you can tell a lot of truth and very slanty ways. So thank you, Chitra, and thanks for bringing up that issue as well. Suhita, you had something for us?
Yeah.
Go for it.
It's all about the states in which we are, solid, liquid, or gas, and many intermediates between them. When we are in some serious disease, so scared, everything around us just full of wheat, treatments job, so cruel, cluster of stars, so horrible. When we get cured with the healing effect of time, so nice, the smell of Madhavi, Big Bang is so innovative.
I love that idea of kind of the states between, and then the Big Bang is so innovative. I love that playing around between these ideas that you're doing, and it sounds really, really interesting. I'd love to see it in writing, to go through it more. But thank you so much, Suhita. Was it fun to write it?
Yes, yeah, it was very fun.
Great. I'm glad you enjoyed. Saraswati, and then we'll come to Anuj.
Hi.
Yeah.
This time it's me. Yeah. Okay.
It is really Saraswati this time. Great.
Yeah. So I was just I came up with two things. Two small poems. I think they're poems, but let me read the one that the shorter one first. Service to mankind. What avatars can it take? From saving manatees to tools for mass empowerment. Is there a definition that you can innovate?
I like it. Yeah. Is there a definition that you can innovate? Thank you.
Yeah.
The other one?
The other one, sitting at my green lush garden, staring at the inchworm, inching through the jasmine bush. I wonder at the agility of an insect so small, merging with nature, you feel connected to the prapancham that holds us all. Prapancham is the universe in Tamil.
Yes, to the prapancham that holds us all. That's really interesting. And I like the fact that you use prapancham. Yeah, nice. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I think, play. And it's great, what's really unexpected is if you're writing about nature and then you throw in a word from one of the other sections, so that really upsets the apple cart in a way. Because a lot of us, we have certain ways of thinking, we're very, we get into a way of thinking, a way of moving, a way of being in the world. And then when we do something that kind of changes that, knocks us off balance, we have to kind of steady ourselves. It can kind of, and that's what this exercise does. It's to throw up new ways of seeing. So thank you. I love that, the little insect and being connected to the prapancham, which reminded me again of the cave of diamonds that Kaveh Akbar was talking about. Thank you. Anuj, do you want to give us your piece?
As I said earlier, that I chose one particular category and then I tried to frame the poem by mixing all the words from different categories. So so I wrote poem of 10 lines, which goes like this. Like, I was married at a young age, fell sick due to tension, rushed to hospital and met Sala over there. He got amused, he got shocked to see me, then gave me an apple. My mood got changed. read fiction at the moment about Hinduism, and then got diverted to humanity. Thought of serving throughout the life, but at the moment woke up with a dreaded dream, and then realized it was a dream, and then took a sigh of relief.
Interesting. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Great. That sounds that's really interesting. And of course, the sigh of relief could be SAI. You know, don't forget you can play with these kind of things. You know, and then you could take Sai and Sai University and all the other meanings of Sai. And, you know, so this is a thing I found myself doing as a child. And I know it's something which is, you know, in India, people really love to pun on words. And I think it's something we do in Ireland as well. And if you get the chance to read James Joyce in Finnegan's Wake, the way he plays with the sounds of words. So sometimes you can say something to yourself, innovate, where's the plate? You know, now I'm sate, you know, to kind of almost do what we call, there's a game that we used to play as children called Chinese whispers, where you would say something to the person beside you, they would say it to the person beside them, and it would get garbled as it goes around. I know the game exists all over the world, but it has different names. So that game, if you play it with yourselves, with your poetry, you'll find all kinds of exciting revelations in your misunderstandings as well. So thank you for that, Anuj. There's a few in the chat, and one of them is medical. The doctor has no one to give his tablets to, so he got a cadaver, said he was going to research to help people. Never thought I will miss the mossies in Tassie. Everything was once fair dinkum. What can I say but good day, mate? So that's great fun. Thank you, Maya. And then Anya has put one in. What up, human? Have you stopped calculating in the white room, exercising your dimensional cunning to look up from being human at the freshly cut Kapurwali at your feet, by your feet? The rolling red tomatoes by them, the Shivali sucking orange from them, the frangipani in turn adding pink and yellow, the kirai next to them doesn't want to be left out, turn away from the metal, look at them, and the other them. Have you found a different exchange? Have you entered artistic clinicality that is home? Wow. Have we entered artistic clinicality that is home? So yeah, love that line. Thank you so much. Thank you. Who is this? Thank you, Anya. Yeah. And anybody else before we move on? We've time to take one more if anybody would like to throw one in. No? Well, I know all of you have little gems in there on your pages. So just it's a way of making a poem and just kind of getting in there and finding out what's going on in your head. And, you know, you have the words on the page, then you can play with how are you going to lay them out? Is it going to look more like this or more like that?
You know, I have one.
Oh, please. Oh my gosh. And more are coming in as well. Go ahead, Srilata, please.
Okay. So this is titled, A Caterpillar Decides to Turn into a Patampuji. And I sit on the park bench translating a caterpillar crawling up a Murungai tree. What will it turn into? To me, this appears like the quiet beginning of a lyric, the crawling, the slowness of words, a cocoon of sadness, until a wet, crushed-looking Patambuji enters your line of vision.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. That feels very finished. Thank you. Thanks. And Grace, would you like to read yours out, or do you want to? Shall I read it out?
Yeah, I can go ahead and read it.
Yeah, go ahead. Please do.
All right. Maire, the pus coming from my hand worried him. He condensed his frustration in that word, dabbing cotton pads. He spoke in rapid Manglish. The Kutti cactus looked the same as it did yesterday or the day before. The statistics of it surviving in this house seems dim. I want to get up and catch the spider dangling from the mango leaves to soothe his worries. I hear the sermons from a faraway church. The bakers are busy selling their hot cakes. The dove orchid is calming my mind, putting me into a drugged sleep.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that feels, it's got a very kind of lyrical feel to it, and it's almost like a little piece of prose poetry. So thank you so much. Yeah, a little story going on there as well. Ganesh Raj has thrown one in. Do you want to read it out quickly, Ganesh? Or shall I read it? Okay, I'll give it a read. Oh, I have the cancer, Salah. I'm addicted to the gadgets. Do I need the drug I am craving or just contributing to every company's greed? I have lost my passion to explore and ability to smell the flowers out in nature. I realize that travel will now be my savior. So there you go. Thank you so much. It's really interesting where that went. The idea that technology is like a cancer almost, or our addiction to it. And then Nivedita, unfamiliar health needs surgery as it becomes aggressive, a family disorder in my already disordered family, destroying, deceiving, destroying. Near my Pungamaram, the body lies waste. That has a very powerful, it's almost like, you know, somebody, a punch coming out of nowhere. And then the last line, waste, is really, really interesting there. Thank you so much. Guys, that was amazing. I mean, I gave you 10 minutes and you've made poetry. So, hey, and I hope you won't leave those go. I hope you'll go back to them and work on them and just, you know, it's all in the rewriting, as they say. It's all in the rewriting. So thank you so much. So we have about 40 minutes left. Is that right, Srilata?
It's about 12:20 here. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So, great. So so now we're going to look at a thing I called found in translation. Everybody talks about lost in translation, but I believe that when you rub different languages together, you get little sparks and you get all kinds of exciting things. So it's the finding in translation that I'm interested in. And this is my image for this. I'm sorry, but I just kind of, one of the nice things about doing overheads is you get to put funny pictures in. So words that catch in your teeth. So people talk about earworms. You know, when they talk about songs and oh, that earworm and it's in my head and I can't get it out of my head. And for me, there are phrases and words. And it's almost like I hear somebody say a word and I'm like, ooh, what would that word taste like? And then the word kind of gets stuck between my teeth. So I talk about words that catch in your teeth, phrases that you just have in your head. So we'll just ignore that for now. We're going to look at a few poems which have phrases in them in other languages. Because usually when I work with people, it takes a lot of energy to get them to start using their different languages. But what's lovely is with this group, you all got the hang of it immediately and you're all just throwing in different languages, which of course is to be expected. Yeah. So I think I can make this a little bit bigger. That might be easier for you all to read. Is that legible for everybody? Yeah. So there's this incredible poet. Her name is Mary Jean Chan. Her book is called Flesh. I would highly recommend you have a look at it. Her heritage is Hong Kong Chinese, but she grew up in the UK. And when you listen to this poem, you'll understand. Now, I don't speak any Cantonese, and these images here are Cantonese. So we're left with words that we do not, unless some of you can, that we cannot understand. And this is really interesting because we can't even make the sounds, you know? So why is she doing this and what impact does that have on the poem? So I just want you to have a little think about that as you're listening. Written in a historically white space. The reader stares at and asks, why don't you write in? I reply, meant that I was brought up in your image. Let us be honest. Had I not learnt and come to your shores, you wouldn't be reading this poem at all. Do you think it was an accident that I learnt for decades until I knew it better than I dreamt in? Is anything an accident these days? Dear reader, you are lucky to have been the center of for the past 20 years. One summer, a taxi driver in Shanghai asked me whether I was my lover's tour guide, declaring that she was from. How does that make me feel? Can you tell me what it is that I should do next? So I'm just pouring myself some coffee. Any comments? Anything you notice? Feel free to pop in the chat as well. How does it make you feel, those blank bits? How do you engage with the poem, having those spaces, those kind of black holes? How does that make you feel? How does that work, do you think? To some extent, I think there's always that temptation to say, I won't put the word in Tamil script in the poem. I won't put the word in Devanagari in the poem because somebody won't be able to read it, or it'll push people away or whatever. But how, because I'm presuming, which is a great presumption, that none of us can read this script. How does that make us feel? Does it push us away or does it pull us in? How do you feel? How do you respond to that? Do you feel angry? Do you feel alienated? Or how does it make you feel? Is it a poem? Yes, somebody's in the chat. Yes. It's like a good idea to fill the blanks with our thoughts than mere reading, I think. Yeah, you have to really read with an active, like, could it be this? Could it be that? I know I actually tried to see if I could understand, like, this pictogram comes here and then the same pictogram comes there. And what would that mean? And, I was almost trying to decode it myself when I was reading it. Somebody else has put in, I try to think of words that fit in those spaces. It pulls me in as I try to imagine the feelings and emotions. Yeah, I think that's the impact. So, I mean, we could talk about what all these different words could be. The reader stares at is it my face? Is it my skin color? Is it my, how I look? What is it? But it's definitely something, that you can see on the outside. Why don't you write in and then, and so on. So, yeah. So I think it's a really interesting way to engage with different languages in poems. We will move on, and you will be getting this poem anyway, so you'll be able to have a more careful read of it. Here is Fiona's attempt. Now, I'm going to probably mess up the Hindi here, so please forgive me. It's done with great respect. Gadi Agya. So this is by Imtiaz Darkar, and I don't know, there's actually, you can actually get I think it's used in a movie as well, I think, if you go online. So it's that song, if any of you know it, that she's playing on. It happened like this. Their country slipped out of their hands and broke, like a cup or an earthen pot. They never spoke as if they remembered the shape it used to have. They never cried over spilt blood, at least not in front of us. It was as if you reassure a guest, oh, don't mind that. It was only a cheap old cup anyway. Broken china brings good luck. And a whole generation swallowed the nightmares that sounded like trains. Gadi Agya Teshan Te. Gadi Agya Teshan Te. When the train came in to its destination, the station drank up the names of their aunts and uncles, their neighborhoods and cities, and our mothers and fathers swallowed the nightmare that sounded like trains. Gadi Agya Teshan Te. Gadi Agya Teshan Te. They swallowed the things they remembered and the cousins who had gone away with the ghost of the place that broke with the cup. One day when my mother was planting potatoes in another country, she dug up a fragment of china that looked as if she remembered something that she had never spoken. That looked at it as if she remembered something they had never that had never been spoken. Gadi Agya Teshan Te, Gadi Agya Teshan Te. Sometimes she dug out of the nightmares something unbroken. She said the neighbors from the other side were kind. They took her in and hid her. They pretended she was one of their own until they could send her home. Gadi Agya, Deshante, Gadi Agya, Deshante, to the country with a different name, to the station on the other side on another train. Anuj, yes.
To be honest, like after reading this poem, like it's not just a poem, it's like a bunch of emotions being expressed in a poem, in a form of poem. Like the author, the poet has tried to convey the whole situation of a station, especially Indian railway station, which you might often see, like Gadi Aa station there. So like they have, like he has tried his best to convey the all the emotions through his poem to the person, to the people whom they want to. And like it's like a bunch of emotions, as I said earlier. People, like I, after reading this poem, I felt as if I am in that poem. I put myself in their shoes, like because I have traveled a lot. In Indian trains, and especially long travel, like going from my place to covering almost 1,500 kilometers. So like it's all about like, so like really it brought tears in my eyes, because it's a bunch of emotions here. So like hats off to all the poet who like who gave his best to express all these things in one go. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, Imtiaz Darkar is a very interesting poet. She was born in Lahore, and then she grew up in the UK, and then she married a man from Bombay. So she spends her life between Bombay and London. So she's a woman who's lived both sides. She's actually Christian, and so she's kind of, you know, married to a Hindu with what sounds like almost a Muslim first name. So she's a, you know, and then the poem itself deals with this travel, but also with partition, and you know, the sadness and the, yeah. So as you say, it's a very emotional poem, and it's structured around this song. There is a song, so you can look it up if you don't know it. It's a Hindi movie song. Yeah, Anuj.
Like especially the last part of the poem, which said, like she said, the neighbors from the other side were kind. They took her in and hid her. Like it's the last poem is so much emotional. Like it took me to back the part of partition, because though I was not there, but I read a lot of genres and incidents of partition. And I even saw in films like what the situation was like during partition of India, because it was one of the long partition, one of the migration took place, which the world witnessed in 1947. So because so much violence took place, people were being murdered on both the sides. And then a woman is trying to heed a girl who is, and pretending as if she is our own, and like she is her own, and she tries her best to heed her into her home until she gets her she gets her actual home where she came from. So like the last part was quite emotional and quite touching. That's the thing which brought exactly tears to my eyes. So I really felt connected, because that's the thing.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that out, Anuj. Yeah, thank you. Any other responses? Does anyone know the song? Any of you familiar with the song? Ah, here we are. The emotions in this this poem reminds me of Khushwant Singh's Train to Pakistan. Okay, I'm not familiar with that poem, but I'll definitely go and look it up, because as in Ireland, we also live with a partition, which is contested and complicated. So I've always had
Question.
Thank you.
May I share something?
Yes.
Like I read a novel that you said just now. It's like Khushwant Singh poem. It's not like it was a poem itself, but it was also a novel which Khushwant Singh wrote, A Train to Pakistan. So like I read that novel. I read that novel just like 2 months back. So it took me to that novel, but I didn't mention that earlier. So when you mentioned that, yeah.
So you're echoing what Grace said. Great. Yeah. No, thank you for throwing that in. Yeah. Anybody else? I suppose from a craft perspective, this is coming from a song. So, you know, Imtiaz is taking a song and then going into where the song takes her, and it takes her back to this memory of her family and her childhood and her mother and all of that. So it's very interesting where a phrase or a song can take us to. You know, the moments, the things that stick with us, the phrases that stick in our heads, the words that catch in our teeth. Yeah. So anybody else want to throw anything in before I move on? We're doing a whistle-stop tour of these poems, but hopefully you'll get to read them over again quietly. So this is a poem by a woman called Fatima Asghar, and she is her family are from Kashmir, and she was born and grew up in the US. But what I want you to notice here is the way she plays with language. So I'm only going to read the bits that are in English. As you'll all know, so it's divided into 3 categories. So there's what they say, how they say it, and what they actually mean. And then here you have in English script, as you know, and this is written in Urdu, I think. And then there's this is Urdu, and then this is Hindi, and then you have it's Punjabi written in Urdu script, and I can't remember the name for it off the top of my head. As far as I know, this is what this is, but I stand to be corrected. So what they say, where are you from, how they say it, a shortcut to the end. Did you want to? Oh no, a shortcut to the end could be a period, a love song, if they weren't locking a drone on target. What they actually mean. You must not be from here. So where are you from? Okay. And the next one. Aap kahan se hai? There is a wrong answer. The next one. Aap kahan se hai? There is a wrong accent. And the last one. Tusi kito ho? How did you forget? How will you remember? So I'm sure you people have a much better understanding of the subtleties of what she's doing with the language here than I have. But I just find it a really fascinating way to deal with that thing of people say one thing, they mean something else. Yes, I would say it is a poem, Prince Raj. Yeah. Yeah, I think it makes us look at language really carefully and really think about words. So for me, it is a poem. And somebody had asked about Mary Jean Chan's, and yes, there is such a thing as a prose poem, and you can definitely Google, I'll just put in here as well, you can Google prose poems. So what do you think of this? Do you think it's a poem, guys? What do you think? Okay, Anuj is shaking his head. He doesn't think it's a poem. Okay. And yeah, it makes us think deeply, so it would qualify as a poem, says Ganesh Raj. Okay, we have conflict. Yes, great. Yeah, Chitra, what were you going to say?
I think a poem is small, but it holds so much. It's self-contained, and that's probably what I look for.
And do you think this is small and self-contained, or yes? So you think it is a poem, or?
I think it is a poem.
Okay, okay. Poem in table, and then somebody else says poem in table. Yes, and I have friends who live their lives by spreadsheets. So like this is like a spreadsheet poem in Excel, for those who live their lives like that. Yeah. So, okay. Well, we'll have to agree to differ there. Some people, oh, Prince Raj, yeah. Did you want to say something?
Yes, ma'am. So can we write poetry in this form in these days?
Yeah.
Will it be acceptable these days?
Is this acceptable as a poem? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, these days means since you consider it poetry, right? But if you see about the current situation, so we gave poetry a different rule, hard and fast rule that it should be in a stanza, it should be like this and that, but it doesn't uh, come in any parameter of the rule which we made poetry. So can we say that when we if we got some work like poetry on anything, can we decorate it in this way? Will it be acceptable?
Acceptable to whom? And acceptable where and for what, you know? So if you're entering a poetry competition and they're very traditional and they say, oh no, unless it's laid out like this, then this is not a poem, maybe. But, you know, this is, her book has been published, if that's any help to you, in the US, and it's also been published. I think you can get it in Ireland as well. I don't know how freely available it is in India, but she is very innovative in form. And it's one of the things which, when I do workshops, I always try to say to people, anything, you know, this is also a poem. She has another poem in the form of a crossword. So I think it's whatever helps you to say, as Chitra said, you know, to say what you need to say, to kind of explore things. Sometimes this layout can be very helpful. And I think different layouts can help different people. So, yeah. Mahalakshmi has thrown, Ganesh Raj says, you could say that what they actually mean depends on so much on how they say it. Well, that's the thing with poetry. The form itself, the way in which you say it, is part of the message. It can change based on the way the words are delivered. Yes, yes. If I were able to read Urdu and Devanagari and the Punjabi script at the end, it would have a different sound because I would be putting those things in, and that would be different as well. Mahalakshmi says, I would see this as an unconventional poem. I think this talks about how speakers of each language hold their own stereotypes and their opinions on other language speakers and the context they come from. Absolutely. And I'm very conscious that the very first one, where are you from, is probably said by a white person in the US to this young woman who's lived in the US all of her life. And so, you know, the alienation of that as well. So, yeah, really interesting. And then the same question asked in different languages can mean different things. So it's that idea of, can we ever really translate? And in this case, in a way, the poet is really being a linkister. She's connecting us to what it feels like to be in those different languages, to be that body in those places with those questions being asked. So, yeah, thank you. Okay, so yeah, I'm conscious our time is ticking. So I'm going to move on to this one. So this is a woman called Shash Trevitt, and she is a Sri Lankan Tamil who left in the 80s. And when she first arrived in the US, she stopped speaking. Her childhood response was to stop speaking. And so language for her, you know, then she learned English. So she has a number of really interesting poems about language and you know, muteness and silencing yourself. So glottophagy actually means killing of a language. Oh no, is it devouring of a language? Oh, I think it's killing of a language or eating another language. I'll look it up in a minute. So glottophagy, Tamil words that lilt, soothing as a lullaby on a mother's breath. They're Isaioli, their music, nourishing our weir, marked on a stave, imagined a few millennia ago, in whispers of promises as they show themselves as Padal, and Katai, and Kavitai, the goddess's gifts from her river throne. Our generations were formed by their fluid natyam, and our voices modulated by their scripted sangitam. And when we dreamed, our dreams erupted in ahs and ees and ohs. building blocks of a nation now without a homeland, a people now without a place. And then in 56, with the Sinhala only act, they tried to silence your inisai, the sweetness of your melody, gag your wearily, and eradicate your mayuluthal. We took to the streets, carrying our truth as our arms, warriors of the Tolkapiam on Gale face green, paying with our blood for your right to be Oronatalada Atakal, a people without a country, in exile, bearing the music of your beauty still. Huge apologies. I didn't give the poem to Srilata in time to read, so I ended up chomping through your Tamil, so I do apologize for my mispronunciations, but I think you get the idea. And I'd love to hear what you think. I'm just going to quickly look up, I think Glotophagy, just so I get the exact meaning, because I don't want to be giving you the wrong. The absorption or replacement of minor languages or dialects by major ones. So there you go. So it's big languages gobbling up small languages. And I'd love you to notice the words that she has glossed and the words that she hasn't glossed. She hasn't glossed Inisai and Isaioli. And why do you think that is? And yeah.
Can I try?
Yes, please. Yeah, tell us.
The one reason I can think of is the words Isaioli, Innisai are very musical themselves. They contain the word music also. Like I said, that in some ways she's inviting us to listen to the actual words and not look at the gloss.
Yeah. And also, for instance, Inisai is then, you know, the sweetness. So in a way, she's also glossed them within the poem. But yeah, absolutely. And that's what's beautiful, isn't it? That she's, in a way, her resistance to, you know, the language act, the kind of the forbidden nature of the language, she's putting it in, and she's putting it in this journal. It's called Modern Poetry in Translation. But what's really interesting is, in a lot of the poems, they're poems in translation. So they'll take a language like, you know, Lithuanian or Hindi or whatever, and then put the poem completely into English. But this poem refuses to be translated into English. It's resisting that. So yeah, thank you, Bharat. Yeah, it keeps the music, it keeps that sweetness, doesn't it? Oh, what do I mean glossed? I mean, she has here nourishing our weir, and weir, she has here life. So as padal, songs, as katai, stories. So she's, you know, given the meaning there, whereas here she has, within the poem itself, the meaning is given. For Inisai, you have sweetness. So it's kind of glossed within the poem. So there's different ways of mixing. When you want to bring a word from another language into a poem, sometimes you decide you want to gloss it. Sometimes you want to do what Mary Jean Chan does, which is just, you know what, you guys don't understand these words, and that's your problem. And she never explains anywhere what those words mean. I generally footnote if I use words from another language, but you know, sometimes people put it within the poem. Here she's put it beside the poem. So there's different ways of doing it. Different ways. Yeah, Bharat.
Just to add on to that, I think there's one other thing that she does is there is an act of translation as well, where she says ஒரு நாடில்லாத ஆட்கள் and the people without a country, and I think she chose to translate it in verse. So
yeah, she did, but she kept the original as well, which is really, and also this, like these words, she doesn't write them in Tamil. So she writes them in English script. So that's also interesting to notice, you know, but she does use the building blocks of a nation, you know, the Mairthagal and the Weirthagal. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering why the Tolkappiyam is neither glossed nor, you know, there's no translation or anything for that. Tolkappiyam is a very old piece of work in Tamil.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting that she doesn't. And is it that she feels like, okay, well, you can go Google that, or you should already know about that, or, you know, is it that? Because so many English writers, you know, people whose mother tongue is English in the UK, for instance, tend to use Greek and Roman myths and just presume everybody, you know, it's you know, Zeus or whatever, and you're supposed to know. So is there a little bit of that going on? To kind of like, well, actually, you know what, this is something you should know. I wonder, but it's really interesting to notice that. Thank you for highlighting that. All of these very political decisions, Chitra has popped in that Mary Jean Chan, their use of the Cantonese script is important and political. It is meant to demonstrate how much emphasis or value we place unjustifiably on distinction. Yes, yeah.
I just wondered though whether you know, the glossing is something that the poet has decided to do, or was it an editorial intervention? You know, do you think that might be the case, or it's kind of part of the poem? The gloss itself on the right margin has a certain visual effect. So is it like thought through like that? Do you think, or could it be an editorial thing?
That's really interesting. And funnily enough, when I was preparing my desk today, I found her book, which has, look at that beautiful Rangoli on the cover. Do you see it? On the cover of her book. For instance, I'm looking through it, and she doesn't do that in any of her poems here. And this book, poem Glotophagy, is not in this book. But Mutumai Kolam, she has as the name of the title of this poem, but at the bottom she has it footnoted what exactly it means, you know, parents of old age. And then she goes on to explain what a kolam is and all of that. And then she has a poem which is completely in Tamil. And after it, she has the poem completely in English. So, you know, it's interesting how, and other poems have footnotes as well. So it's interesting. That's a good point, Srilata. That may have been a decision by the MPT, the Modern Poetry and Translation group. So that's a really interesting question and a really interesting consideration. So I'm going to move on to the next one. Oh yes, Kaveh Akbar. Okay, we'll have a quick look at Kaveh's poem, and then I'm going to give you the exercise, but I'm afraid you're going to have to do it at home, so we won't. You can always send your poems on to me. I would love to see them, and we could even have a few minutes, maybe. I don't know if we'll overlap with the next or whatever, but this is one of my favorite poems. I mean, all of these are my favorite poems, folks. That's why I'm getting up at 5:30 in the morning in Ireland, just so I can talk poetry with all of you. But and this is really interesting, and how he glosses. So this is called Do You Speak Persian?
Can you please zoom the page? Can't read it very well.
Absolutely. Huge apologies. Okay. Is that better? Is that better?
Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. That's brilliant. Do you speak Persian? Some days we can see Venus in mid-afternoon. Then at night, stars separated by billions of miles, light traveling years to die in the back of an eye. Is there a vocabulary for this? One to make dailiness amplify and not diminish wonder. I have been so careless with the words I already have. I don't remember how to say home in my first language, or lonely, or light. I remember only Dalam Barat Tang Shode, I miss you. And Shab Bakir, good night. How is school going, Kaveh Jun? Dalam Barat Tang Shode. Are you still drinking? Shab Bakir. For so long, every step I've taken has been from one tongue to another. To order the world I need, you need, he, she, it needs. The rest left to a hungry jackal in the back of my brain. Right now, our moon looks like a pale cabbage rose. The lam barat tang shode. We are forever folding into the night. Shab Bakir. And I'm quite sure my Farsi is as bad as my Hindi and my Tamil, so apologies again if anybody is offended by it. Yes, Saraswati.
Some poetry causes you to think beyond what the poet had intended, I presume. As here, for example, I started to cry.
It's very powerful, isn't it?
And it's not clear if that's a good thing, because you lost your sense of what's the word for it? Sense of being aloof from it to gauge it and to read it in a way that brings out all the nuances of it. And perhaps you choose one at the end and say, this is what it means. So I felt that I may have missed something in the process of becoming very emotional about it.
That's a really interesting perspective. Thank you so much. And Ganesh Raj is saying, I can't look past the line. I have been so careless with the words I already have. Yeah, I mean, it is such a powerful, and you know, all of us, we all have words. And oh my gosh, another poet. He isn't here today, but I'll maybe try and bring him along the next day. Ocean Vuong. He talks about giving every word love and respect, that every word he puts in a poem. And when you read his work, it just blows you away. So when I'm in the presence of someone who gives such respect to language, I just feel as this gentleman was saying, you know, it bowls me away with the emotion and the fact that we use these things every day, you know, and we treat them so carelessly. So yeah, as Ganesh Raj says, yeah, such a powerful line, yes, and goes beyond this poem, absolutely. I think Anuj wanted to throw something in there, yeah?
So basically, as you said, that this poem is a very strong poem. And again, I try to, because after this poem, again, I related to it myself, because as it's been 1.5 months in Chennai of mine. I've never been to South India before, because I come from North place. So like even here also, like as you mentioned the poem, like the poet is expressing himself that when he went to new place, he was only knowing 2 words. That is good night, the Persian term in English, and then is like I miss you. That is Delam Bharat Thanks Shodel. So here only when I was in Chennai, like I just learned 2 words in the beginning. That is illa and ama. Whenever someone used to say something, I just used to say either illa or ama. And sometimes so I just here only 2 words are there. And after coming in Chennai, I just learned those 2 words. But right now I'm learning Tamil. So that's how I connected this poem to myself.
Fabulous. Yeah, and great that you're learning Tamil. I'm going to keep going, but because there's so much we could say about this, but I just want to keep on moving. So basically the exercise out of this, which I'm going to send you so you can do it at home, will be to think about words and phrases which you cannot fully translate or which we love too much to translate. So the lam barat tang shode, that has stuck with him. Those are words that caught between his mouth. The other poem with Teshante, what is it? Gadi Agya Teshante. That again is something that has stuck in Imtiaz's head. So what are the words, what are the phrases that stick in your head, that though they're in that language, they just will not go? And then we won't be able to do that. Write down as many of those as you can. And when you start thinking about them, even if you have a little notebook in your pocket or you just note them on your phone, just keep noting them and you'll start noticing. Even a poem around Amma and Illa would be really interesting, you know. So then choose one of them and just write about it. So just force yourself to sit down, put the timer on your phone, whatever comes to your head, start with that line. Where does it take you? And maybe give yourself 10 minutes or whatever. And then So I asked, I wanted you, each of the phrases, I was going to give you 60 seconds. And then I was going to say, now go back to one of those phrases that really is hot for you, that has a lot of energy for you, and keep writing, follow it, see where it takes you. And then you were going to share that with us. So that was my fantasy, but because you all had such amazing work, we got to hear so many opinions, we got to have so many poems. It's been such a wonderful morning, and I'm so looking forward now to our next workshop together as well. I hope you all had as much fun as I did, and you will be getting all of that in an email from Professor Srilata, and hopefully it'll all be clear to you. And feel free to share the poems with your friends. Feel free to Google the poets, check out Ocean Vuong. Oh my God, Night Sky with what is it? Night Sky with something wounds, with entry wounds. It's or is it exit wounds? Anyway, Night Sky with wounds. And time is exit wounds. Thank you very much, Anya. Night Sky with exit wounds. Oh my God, it'll blow you away. And his other book, On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous, is another. It's a novel. But it's actually poetry. To get back to that definition of novels and poetry. And I don't think you'll be able to read any of that without emotion. Srilata, thank you so much for this space, for all these wonderful people and their wonderful words. And I've just had an amazing morning. So thank you. And I have a whole day left to go. It's only 7:30 over here. So thank you all so, so much.
Hang on, we can't let you go without a formal vote of thanks.
You have to give me my scarf. You have to give me my shawl.
I wish I could. But we do have a formal vote of thanks, which Bharat will propose.
I mean, I'll try my attempt at a formal one, but I just want to say thank you so much, Fiona. It's been fantastic, and I'm really sad that this has to end today, and I really mean it. And hopefully we can pick some of where we left in the next workshop. And others, please note that it's on the 24th, and we'll send out 23rd, and I'll send you another form, etc. But thank you, Fiona. I know it's very early, and we just brought so much warmth and energy and insight, and I'm sure many of us will walk away loving poetry a little bit more today, if not anything else. And I also would like to thank Professor Srilata. Thank you for establishing the Center for Writing and Translation. This is our first event, and we would like to see many more. That's the other thing, and also the participants. And thank you all, the students, also faculty, for engaging so well. I think we wouldn't have done what we did without all of it. So hopefully see some of you in the next workshop. And for now, bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, participants.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Lovely. Yeah. We should take a screenshot of it. But
Ma'am, can I share something?
Yeah, Anuj, yeah.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed this session, and today I learned one new thing. Like earlier, when I used to write poem, I used to look for poetic devices. Like there should be rhyming words, and then it should follow some trend. Like rhyming word is the first paragraph, first stanza. Then you have to think of word that should be another rhyming. It should be matchable. So today I knew that you don't have to focus on only rhyming things. You can express yourself without rhyming. But the thing is, it should be conveyable to the audience whom we want to convey. So that's the thing which I learned today itself in the new session, and I'll try to put it I'll try to point down in my poem and in my future when I write. Thank you very much for the session.
You're so welcome. And just all of you just thank you for your participation, and thank you so much, Srilata and Bharat, for organizing, and Chitra and everybody for your participation. Thank you.
yes. Bye.
And thank you so much. Warm regards. Thank you.